Friendship isn't the big things, it's a million little things. Hello there friends, and welcome to this, another episode of A Million Little TV Shows podcast. This is where we break down and discuss episodes of TV shows that you may not have even heard of. I believe these TV shows need a little more love, and that is what this platform is here to do. Each week we will be covering different shows from all over the globe. We'll be breaking down each episode, giving you the main highlights, and going through it bit by bit. But for now, I think it's best that we find out what's on the menu today. Hello there, and welcome to this, A Million Little TV Shows podcast. Now, this is now Season 6, Episode 2 of A Million Little TV Shows podcast, and I'm really excited about this one today. We're going back inside number 9, and after the disappointment of the final season, or at least the final 2 episodes, I'm pleased to get back into something that I actually really do enjoy, and hopefully my appreciation of those last 2 episodes will grow as I go along, but I felt they felt flat when I actually watched them. However, today we aren't focusing on that, we're focusing on Season 6 of Inside Number 9, and there are some great episodes in this season, and I'm pleased that you guys are along for the journey. Now, just to get some business out of the way, I did announce this on the episode 1 right at the end, but I wanted to put it at the beginning here before I got into Inside Number 9. This podcast is now on YouTube. It is just the audio, but it is over there. So if you do like listening to podcasts on YouTube, it's over there now. So head over, search for A Million Little TV Shows podcast, and it will be there. Also, if you look at my link tree, which is in my bio, you will find it on there as well. And while you are looking at my link tree, hopefully you will see the other link that's on there. I mean, there's several links on there, but the other link is my Patreon. Due to the fact that this podcast is a big part of my life, and it is very difficult to get any sort of adverts on here that will pay, I've had to look to Patreon to try and get some income for the podcast. And so what am I doing over on Patreon? Well, I've decided to do a thing called A Million Little TV Shows Goes Mainstream. And that is going to entail me talking about things like Game of Thrones and Ted Lasso, the shows that I didn't want to talk about on here due to the fact that they were just so mainstream it didn't fit into the niche box that I actually made for myself when I made this podcast up. But if you want to hear me talk about things like Game of Thrones, I go through each episode and talk about everything that happens in the episode and then give a wrap up at the end as to my thoughts and feelings about the show, as I do with this podcast. But over there, I will be doing more mainstream shows, and hopefully when the Harry Potter series comes out, I will be covering that week by week. But as for today, so hopefully you guys go over there and subscribe to my Patreon, and it'll really help the podcast out. As for today, however, I'm going to be going through Inside Number 9, as I've already stated. So let's get into the show. This is Inside Number 9, Season 6, Episodes 1 to 3. Episode 1, Wuthering Heist. This episode stars Kevin Bishop as Arlo, Gemma Whelan as Columbina, Patterson Joseph as Pantalone, Rosa Robson as Hortensia, Dino Kelly as Mario, and Shearsmith as Scaramucci and Pemberton as the Doctor. The episode is set in a warehouse and is based around a commedia dell'arte, but also is based on a heist movie. And so there is a lot of breaking the fourth wall, especially from Columbina. Arlo arrives first, and he is known as the Fool in this. He starts talking to the empty room, and then eventually hears a voice call back. However, he thinks that it is an echo turned into a woman's voice. Just then, the voice speaks out again, and it's Columbina, but he now thinks that the voice is actually his echo in front of him, and gets confused. Eventually, Columbina tells him, "Look, I'm over here," and they talk. The boss arrives, and he has his daughter with him, Hortensia, the boss being Pantalone. It would seem that the heist is to steal £12 million worth of diamonds, and they're going to be using explosives to do so. We are told by Columbina that there is a subplot to this as well, as she addresses the audience, and it turns out that Hortensia likes the doctor's son Mario and has written him a letter, which Columbina looks at the audience and says it's as if people don't know what messaging is in this world. Hortensia, however, is going to be married off by her father to the captain who we find out later is Scaramouche. And in another fourth wall breaking moment, Arlo goes to sing the Queen song Bohemian Rhapsody and it gets bleeped out, and he asks, "What was that?" And Columbina has to answer, "Oh, we couldn't afford the rights." Eventually the Doctor and Mario turn up, and it turns out that Mario has a bunch of fake diamonds down his pants so that they can switch for the real diamonds, and it seems that they are going to be running a heist of their own on the group. Eventually Mario gets the letter from Hortensia, but thinks it's from the captain. It would seem that Mario is actually gay and is after Scaramouche, where obviously Hortensia is the one who is after Mario, and Scaramouche is after Hortensia. So there's a love triangle plot in there as well. So they do a rundown of how the heist is going to go, and essentially it is an armoured vehicle that they are going to place some explosive on top of, and then they're going to steal the keys and the diamonds, and then they're all going to head back to this warehouse. However, there is a twist, as there always is. It's inside number 9 after all. And as Columbina goes into the back room, she calls for backup. She is an undercover cop, and she tells them that they don't suspect a thing, but they're about to head out to do this heist. But very much like Reservoir Dogs, someone ends up getting injured, and in this case, it's Arlo. Arlo comes back and he's shot in the foot. As the other members start to appear, more of the situation is revealed, and it seems like as Arlo was distracting the guard, he ended up shooting himself in the foot, literally, because he's an idiot. And then they've ended up being surrounded by cops, but they managed to get away with both the keys and the lockbox. And so, before the boss and Hortensia can get back, Arlo is having his foot treated by Columbina, while Mario manages to get the keys away from her and open the lockbox to switch over the diamonds so that they can keep the real ones and everyone else gets the fake ones, so that he and his father, the Doctor, can run away. And he stores the real diamonds in a blue and white plastic bag, and all before the boss comes back, with Hortensia in his arms. Hortensia is of course dead, and right now the boss only trusts one person. He tells Columbina to come and stand in front of him and asks her to point out who is the person that did this. But as she turns to look at the group, he takes a knife and slices it across her throat. He says that he knew that she was the rat because Hortensia had seen her fiddling with her microphone. The boss also blames Scaramouche for the reason that essentially he left them, and that's what got Hortensia killed. And so the boss decides to go after Scaramouche, but he's concerned about the fact that Hortensia is dead. It's here that Mario, believing that Scaramouche wrote the letter to him, says, "I don't understand why you so bothered about Hortensia," and that Scaramouche wrote Mario a letter. However, when the boss takes the letter, he says, "No, this is my daughter's handwriting." And then the Doctor stands up and says, "Yeah, that letter wasn't for you, Mario, it was for me." And he tells the story of how they've been having an affair. And he says that he is going to take the diamonds with his son and they're going to leave, not knowing that the diamonds aren't in the box anymore. Eventually it ends up in a Mexican standoff situation where they're all pointing guns at each other, and eventually, after a moment, shots run out and the only one left standing is the boss. Arlo, who has been shot through the foot, is still sat down watching the whole thing unfold. Arlo thinks that he's going to get shot by the boss, but the boss doesn't care about Arlo. He just takes the box and says that he has to go and meet his fence, and just leaves Arlo. He says he's sorry that he can't do more for him, but Arlo says, "Can I have one last request? Can you make me a sandwich?" Throughout the whole episode, all Arlo has wanted is a sandwich. The boss tells him, "I haven't got time for that," picks up the blue and white bag and throws it to Arlo and says, "There'll be something in there." The boss leaves. Arlo gets up and walks out to leave as well, looking in the bag and seeing that there's nothing left in there apart from what seem to be some clear mints. He takes one, puts it in his mouth and realises it isn't a mint. It's a real diamond. And as he walks out, he shouts back into the room, "Hey Echo, are you coming with me?" And at that point, his twin brother comes out, bounds across the room and leaves with Arlo. Now, I don't know why this episode got such a bad rap, but I think it's quite fun. There's very fun jokes in there. There's a lot of my type of humour where you use language to interpret other things other than what it's meant to be. And a lot of smutty type jokes in there, which I do always appreciate. I do find them very, very funny. But it just didn't seem to land with a lot of people, and I don't understand why. Also, anything that is breaking the fourth wall and smutty, I mean, come on, you've just made $1 billion film out of Deadpool, and yet this isn't good enough, apparently. It's very weird how the last 4 years have gone, but I did enjoy this episode so much. It's very, very funny, and I implore anyone to go and watch it. It's great. Episode 2, Simon Says. This episode stars Lindsay Duncan as Loretta, Nick Mohammed as Gavin, Pemberton as Spencer, and Shearsmith as Simon. So this episode is quite apt, due to the fact that I've just started the Patreon section which covers Game of Thrones. But we start the episode with Spencer coming home. He's panicked and there's blood on his clothes and on his hands. He gets out of the clothes and puts them in the washing machine, as well as washing his hands, and then starts to look around his flat. There is a bunch of bloody marks all over the flat, and as he's scrubbing them down, there's a call. It's actually one of those sort of ring doorbell things, and as he answers it, Simon is stood there. He tells him he saw the whole incident and that it wasn't his fault, but he does have evidence of it, and he wants to know if he can talk to Spencer or whether he should just go to the police. Spencer buzzes him in. It would seem that Spencer is a writer of some sort, and has a fantasy series called The Ninth Circle, which has most recently aired on TV, and, by all accounts, to not-so-rave reviews. It seemed that the incident included Gavin coming over to him and telling him everything that was wrong with the TV show, and Spencer has lost it and thrown him to the ground before running off. Simon, however, has turned up and told him that Gavin was dead after Spencer left the scene, but Simon is such a fan of Spencer that he has got rid of the body and thrown it into the Thames, and hopefully they'll just see it as another drunk guy. Simon shows Spencer the video, and after a while Spencer decides to delete it due to the fact that that's the only evidence. He asks Simon how far he's got to go, and Simon says, "I'm going up to Sunderland." So for the night, just so Simon doesn't talk to the police, he tells him that he can stay with him for the night, and then he can travel home tomorrow. And as he does, Simon, being a fan of the Ninth Circle, including having his own podcast, the irony of that, takes him up on his offer. The next morning, Simon talks to Spencer and tells him that he's taken something from Gavin, and it turns out that this is a full notebook with a whole brand new ending for the Ninth Circle. And essentially he says it's a lot better than the one that Spencer wrote, and he thinks that maybe they should do something about it, and that they could appeal to people and get this made. Spencer tells him that he's not bothered about it, and nobody's really bothered about it, but Simon tells him that his agent, Loretta, believes that this is a good idea and that she's on her way over now, and they're going to go through it together. When Loretta arrives and she tells Spencer that Simon's correct, everyone hated the original script and nobody liked the fact that it was ending the way that it ended. And so maybe this is a good idea, and she set the cogs in motion to actually get this sorted. And so Spencer's totally put out by it, but now he has to write a new script. He's also going to have to appear on Simon's podcast because Simon's going to be living with him for the next few weeks while they're writing the script. And by there, I mean Simon and Spencer. Simon is going to be getting a co-writing credit on the whole thing, and he is essentially trying to take over. During his podcast, he states that this show is now for the people, whereas before Spencer just thought it was for him, but according to Simon, that isn't the case anymore. And so, after what seems like a couple of weeks go past, and Spencer has finally written the last ever episode of The Ninth Circle and sends it off to his agent. And by this point, Simon has not only manipulated him to write a script, but also manipulated him into making sure that he gets a part in the show. And so, just after the script is sent off to Loretta to check, there's another knock at the door. Spencer goes to answer it, and it turns out that it's Gavin. Gavin explains the situation, that he and Simon know each other and put this plot together so that they could basically get an audience with him. And now Gavin cannot believe that this script is actually going to be made. Simon comes back and he and Gavin start to argue. And then when Spencer tells him that you've got nothing on me anymore, even though Simon had reminded him earlier that he may have deleted the video from his phone, but it's still on the cloud. And that's one thing that he was holding over him this whole time. But now Spencer says, you've got nothing on me. Gavin's right there, so I can't get done for killing him because he's there. And so Simon takes one of the many national TV awards and stabs Gavin with it over and over. Gavin falls to the side and Simon tells Spencer that I'm going to frame you for this. You have stolen this guy's ideas. You've fought with him in the street, and I've got video evidence of that. He's turned up at your flat, and now you've killed him. So it's either you do what I say, or I go to the police. And so he takes Spencer by the hand and just says, it's just going to be me and you forever now. They head into the bedroom, and as Spencer in shock just sits on the bed, he says, this is it for us. And as Simon goes to lay next to him, Spencer pounces. He puts a pillow over his face and kills Simon. Spencer comes out of the bedroom and walks to the place where Gavin was. And it turns out that this was a whole ruse as well. And Gavin isn't actually dead. He's just in the bathroom. Gavin apologises and asks if Spencer will sign some things for him. And as Spencer agrees to, he ends up taking his award and smashing Gavin over the head with it. A while later, Spencer gets a call from Loretta, and she tells him that it's 5 stars across the board, you've made your comeback, and they want 2 more series out of you for the 9th Circle. Spencer looks through Gavin's notebook and knows that he has enough notes to actually make it a possibility. Loretta tells him, look, if you need to, we'll just get some writers in, and they can help you out with it. We don't have to do it all on our own. And she says, we can just pay them peanuts. Spencer says, why pay them at all? I can just get rid of them and dump them in the Thames if I want. And when Loretta asks, do you want to say anything to the press, just a one-liner? He says, yeah, tell them I did it for the fans. Like I say, with me doing the extra bit now with the Game of Thrones series, this is very apt. And I forgot this episode existed, and then obviously I've started doing this new project, and this came up. It's as if it's kismet. And I'm really happy that this episode exists. It's a very interesting way around the whole situation, and especially at the time, because Game of Thrones ended and there was a lot of controversy around that, and this kind of existed off the back of it. But I do think this was incredibly acted. The only thing I would say is Nick Mohammed's Scottish accent is a little bit dodgy, but I'm sure we can forgive him for that because it's Nick Mohammed and apparently he's one of the nicest people on TV. So it's such a fun episode, very cleverly done. And I do like the manipulation tactics of Reese's character in this, because the way that he does it is as if someone out of one of these fantasy shows would have done it. He's played Spencer like an absolute fiddle, and all he's trying to do is get a part in this show, and it's ended up costing him his life. But I also do like the fourth wall break at the end, where Pemberton looks down the barrel of the camera and just says, I did it for the fans. I got goosebumps just thinking about it, because it is a chilling line, and it is the way he does it. He looks really cool while he does it, and such a good show. Such a fucking good show. Episode 3, Lip Service. This episode stars Charles Armstrong as the Home Secretary, Sian Clifford as Iris, Pemberton as Felix, and Shearsmith as Eric. Felix enters a hotel room. It seems to be one of those sort of budget hotels, and when he walks in there, it is pretty grim in there in all fairness. He goes over, looks out the window, and then heads over to the bed. Once he sits down, he screams into a pillow. There is obviously something wrong. He's in distress about something. But as he moves the pillow away from his face, he looks where it was originally, and there is a tissue on top of the mattress. And then behind the headboard is an adult magazine. He discards the tissue and has put the magazine on the bed when there's a knock at the door. As he answers, it's the hotel manager, Eric, and he tells him that there was a noise complaint from another guest, and he said that he heard noises of distress. But Felix just says, it must have been the TV. The manager, Eric, says that he'd like to come in and just check out the room. He also tells Felix that there are people that like to rent these rooms by the hour, and that he is trying to stamp that out as best as possible, and he hopes that there's going to be no funny business going on in that room. Felix tells him that there's definitely nothing going to be going on, and Eric leaves. Moments later, there is another knock at the door, and when he answers it, it is Iris. Iris comes in and tells him the price list, all including sexual acts. And when Felix says, I think there's been a mistake, she says, I'm joking. That's not what I'm here for, obviously. She says, the officer spoke to you and you should know everything when it comes to my service. She goes, perches herself by the window and tells him that essentially she can pretty much lip read whatever is going to be happening, and Felix tells her the backstory, that his wife has started a new job and he feels that she is now cheating on him, and that she will be in a room across the street later on today, and that is why they're both there, so that Iris can read the lips of his wife and he can take any notes. But just as Iris describes to Felix something that his wife may have said about whether she can look at it or suck it, Felix runs over and says, let me look, and tries to grab the binoculars off of her. At this point, the door knocks again, and Felix realises that it's going to be Eric, and he is a tyrant. He asks Iris to get in the cupboard, and she refuses, but after a moment, she heads off to the bathroom instead. Eric comes in and checks out the room. It's as if he's trying to trick Felix. He thinks that he knows what's going on in there, and he's trying to catch him out. After an unsatisfactory inspection, Eric leaves. Iris comes out and assumes her old position, and she is sat watching what is going on across the street when she tells Felix that his wife needs to make a phone call to Max. It's at this point that Felix's phone rings, and in quite a clever scene, we hear the conversation coming from Iris, which would be Felix's wife's side, as well as seeing Felix actually answer the call. And so we find out that actually Felix and his wife aren't together anymore. In fact, they were never married, and that 8 months ago they split up. The reason that she's calling today is because she needs to make sure that he's picking up his son tomorrow. She also tells him about the restraining order that she has on him and that he needs to stop stalking her. She knows he's a nice guy, but this isn't good, and that she just wishes that he'd move on. After the phone call, Iris begins to describe what Felix's wife's boss is doing and saying how much he wants to help her out. Felix grabs the binoculars, throws them against the wall, and sits down on the bed. Iris goes to leave, and she can see how broken he is by all of this. He tells the story of how he came across her company, and essentially that he was on a forum online, a bit like Mumsnet, where it's just sad divorced men on there talking about their own lives. And someone suggested that maybe if she was having an affair, it was best to find out, so that he could either move on, or if she wasn't, that maybe there was a chance still. At this point, Iris feels sympathy for him, and they almost kiss. But of course, at that point, the hotel manager knocks on the door again. Iris heads off into the bathroom, and Felix has just had enough of this guy Eric, and basically tells him, look, I'll be done in an hour, so then you can come and clean up any fluids that I've got everywhere, and just closes the door on him. As Iris is actually using the bathroom, Felix notices that she gets a notification on her phone, and it's from the dad's forum that Felix was using. He starts to go through her bag, suspecting her of something different, and finds a USB in there. He takes his laptop, hooks it up, and starts to try and find out what's on this USB. After all, it has his initials on it. He finds that there's videos on there of him, and he can't understand why. After a moment, Iris comes out and she resumes her position and starts looking out the window. Felix starts to inquire how she came across his case and how come she was assigned, and she just tells him that it was just luck. He then asks about the USB, and she tells him that actually what happened was she was sent to investigate him, because the man that Felix's ex actually works for is quite a rising star and quite prominent in his field. It seems that Felix had to be investigated because there may be threats on this guy's life, and therefore they thought Felix might be a threat. But once she started investigating him, she wanted Felix to realise that he's not a bad guy, and that she tells him this story that she fell in love with him and wanted to show him that there was a different path. They end up on the bed together and start kissing. But after a moment, they slip through the middle of the beds because it's just two singles pushed together, and as they're giggling and trying to sort themselves out, Iris sends Felix over to the now closed curtains and tells him to open them. As he does, all of a sudden, there is gunshots. The man that Felix's ex was working for has been shot. At that point, Iris throws him a hairdryer, and there's a commotion outside, and a bullet comes through the window and hits Felix. Felix falls to the ground dead, as a man enters from the adjoining room and helps Iris clean up. At that point, they plant a gun on him and leave the room before the hotel manager walks in. Next, we see a press conference by the Home Secretary, and he is telling the press that this man, Dimitri, had made himself a lot of enemies, and it was nothing to do with this government, and any conspiracy theories that say otherwise have got their proof now that it was just a man acting on his own, going after his actual girlfriend, not Dimitri. And just as the Home Secretary is taken away, we see that his security detail is Iris. I never remember the conclusion to this episode. I always remember what happens, I always remember the sequence of things that happen, and I always remember that Felix gets shot, but I never remember how it actually ends, and it's always a shock to me when I see that Iris is the Home Secretary's security, even though as soon as I see the Home Secretary and as soon as I see the hand come in to take him away, I know who it is, and I'm like, oh, it's Iris, of course it is, but I forget every time I'm watching the show, which makes this so good. Those twists and turns, and they make you forget, and once you actually remember, for instance in the last episode with Nick Mohammed, I'm thinking, oh, yeah, that's where he dies. But then you remember afterwards that, no, he doesn't die there. He actually faked that death as well. And it turns out that Steve Pemberton's character has to kill him. Inside Number 9 is just so fucking great. It's a shame it's gone. I get why they've done it. Inside Number 9, Inside 9 series, I get it. It is a shame that it's finished, but going through these episodes again, I know that this isn't going to be the last time I watch them, because I will watch them again. Obviously, I won't comment on them again, but I will watch them again. They're so fun, and I hope if you are out there and you haven't watched them, you do go and watch them. They're really worth a watch. As for today, I am done, and just one last plug for the Patreon. I hope you get over there. I hope you can help out this podcast. It would really be a massive thing for me if you could really help us out. I never thought doing a podcast would be this much work, and I get why people who do podcasts say that it is. And now that I'm putting more into it to try and get more out of it, it is a hell of a lot of work. So if you can go over there and subscribe, it would mean the world to me. It really would. As for next week, we'll be covering 5 episodes of Hannibal, and then we will be back inside Number 9 to cover the second half of the season 6. So please come join me there, and I just hope that you're all doing well out there. But as for today, this is it. I am done, and I will speak to you soon. Bye.
And that is it for now, amigos. And yes, I am as angry as you are at me for that sentence, but I hope you enjoyed the show and had some fun along the way. It means a lot that you are listening and supporting me. This is an independent podcast after all, and doesn't get a lot of backing, so it is great to know that you're out there, you're listening, and if you want to come talk to me on any of the platforms I'm on, just come say hi. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, and I'm even a little bit on TikTok. I don't post that much, but I'm on there. And you can also drop comments in the comment sections on any of the platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, wherever you get podcasts from. But as always, thank you for your time, and I will speak to you soon.